engineering training in a slightly more classical discipline than might be thought. He's a Wallace Stevens man. For a while there this afternoon, there was some question as to whether this was all going to come to pass. Like when I went down to the airport to get Jerry, I was told that he'd be there at 2:02, and he finally came back. He came down the escalator at 10 after 5, which made for a long day in the Des Moines airport. But in keeping with the week, I read a detective novel. But there were a lot of problems, but I was aware of the fact that once people get into the National Affairs Institute's movie, there's really no stopping what's going to happen. So now I'll introduce Jerry Griswold.
My name's Jerry Griswold. Among other things, I'm a casualty of airlines and a graduate student at the University of Connecticut. This semester as, am I coming through? This semester is last semester, and for the last 2 years at the University of Connecticut, I've taught a course in the counterculture. What I'm going to talk about tonight is the Whole Earth Catalog and its folktale. And by its folktale, I mean Gurney Norman's Divine Rights Trip. This forms a chapter of a book I'm writing, a popular culture study of the counterculture. The chapter I'm going to read to you tonight, I feel there's a great deal more work that can be done on it. In fact, I intend to do some more work with Gurney Norman's Divine Rights Trip. But in any event, I'll read to you what I have. I want to thank the National Affairs Institute, Gordon Herbster, who waited for me in the delightful Des Moines airport for 3.5 hours. Don Dunlap for inviting me, and the different people who've been kind enough to invite me. I think it's helpful to read these kind of things ahead of time because my friends are getting tired of listening to me read them to them, and so I'm glad I'm able to read them to at least strangers tonight. I guess what the thing is, I'll read the paper on the Whole Earth Catalog, then after that you can ask me questions, and then we'll tap dance. Okay. I suppose I should tell you what kind of popular culture critic I am. My background was, I suppose, I did my undergraduate work in the West Coast, was at one of the most traditional, humanistic, history of ideas places that exist in the United States. That means I read things like Pascal, Montaigne, Hume, Hegel. What we thought popular culture was in the West Coast was we thought Melville and Hawthorne and people like that were in popular culture. But I was sent out to do my graduate work on the East Coast to do something respectable with my life and to get gentility, which resides on the East Coast. And I started reading Tom Wolfe, Marshall McLuhan, Ken Kesey, Neal Cassidy, people like this. When my friends in the West Coast found out, my friends in the Academy found out I was reading things like this, they communicated back and forth to each other that I was stolen by the gypsies. So that's the kind of background that I come from. So the technique that I use in popular culture criticism is a combination of both, in the sense that it's like highbrow, respectable kind of history of ideas approach, combined with low-rent subjects like popular culture. The result is that when you take the venerable, urbane, respectable techniques of the history of ideas that deal with timeless topics, and you take things like Ken Kesey, Neal Cassidy, Tom Wolfe, and mix this with these venerable history of ideas approach, what happens is if you mix the timeless and time, and the result is some sort of incarnational madness, as if Woody Allen was pretending he was Franz Kafka. And so that's, in a way, I suppose, to explain the kind of things I've been doing on the counterculture. Other people, of course, have been writing on the counterculture. Names like, what's his name, Reich spring to mind. I'll never forget his name. Charles Reich and Theodore Roszak, all my competitors, and a few other people. And I suppose when I think about writing about the counterculture, two things pop to mind. One is something, of course, from my traditional serious history of ideas approach. side of me. One thing that springs to mind is Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy. The other thing that springs to mind from my sort of popular culture approach is that famous movie starring Annette Funicello, Frankie Avalon, and Bob Cummings called Beach Party, 1963. Those are the two things that spring to mind immediately. Beach Party, 1963, because Bob Cummings in this movie is an anthropologist. In a way, he's sort of an early popular culture critic about the time of Richard Hogarth and Ray Brown and Marshall McLuhan. And what he does, those are interesting movies. The whole movies, all the Beach Party genres, if you want to notice, all have a wide cultural spectrum, in the sense that if you take a look at Cooper's The Prairie, we have a wide sort of cultural spectrum. On the one hand, we have two types of Indians, Spanish Catholic, an Old Testament family. This same sort of cultural panorama appears in the Beach Party stories as well. We have beatniks, surfers, that's Frankie Avalon, Annette Funicello, serious scholars like Bob Cummings, and motorcycle hoods, things like this. This is so that we can have a sort of wide audience appeal in the same way that Coca-Cola has these multiracial, multinational hand-holding commercials. Well, back to Beach Party, 1963. Bob Cummings is standing in the apartment, in his apartment house window, looking down at the beach where Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon are frugging and writing the big one in, hanging 10. And he's sitting there with his telescope watching them. And he's an anthropologist, but the strange thing begins to happen to Bob Cummings. The more he begins to watch Annette Funicello, the more and more I think you see Humbert Humbert looking at Lolita. The more you see Bob Cummings looking at Frankie Avalon, the more and more you see Mann's Death in Venice with Aschenbach looking at Tadzio. There's a sort of lust growing up in Bob Cummings' eyes. And slowly he turns into what I would suggest happens to a number of other popular culture critics that deal with the counterculture. Slowly comes into a sort of pederastic fantasy with these people, moves into the surfer circle, and slowly becomes what we might call a, quote, member of this surfing society. Well, the strange thing is that Bob Cummings, as part of the surfer group, is as curious as, let's say, taking your father out to a swinging potato chip party where you're playing your Frankie Avalon records. It's an odd thing to have Bob Cummings there. In the same way, it's an odd thing that Gustav Aschenbach finally ends up in Death in Venice putting cosmetics on his face. In a way, it's sort of sad. But we have this cycle of in the sense in Beach Party of the distanced anthropologist who then becomes a voyeur with sort of mildly pederastic overtones, then a participant observer, and finally a member, right? I would suggest this happens to a number of people who deal with the counterculture. The other thing, of course, now to remember that sprung to mind, I see all these people discovered I'm not from the Des Moines Register. Okay, this lecture night is on the Whole Earth Catalog. The other thing that comes to mind tonight, we'll get around the Whole Earth Catalog yet. The other thing that springs to mind is Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy. Nietzsche says in here that the Greek chorus before Euripides played a significant part, right? They were on stage. They played a significant part in the play, but they're different in a sense from the audience, huh? If there was a Greek play being put on here and the chorus was here like singing their things, I don't know what they'd be singing, but they're up here singing something, and the audience is out there. The audience looks at this as a play, right? These are actors doing their things. The chorus, according to Nietzsche, sees the God within the actors. Doesn't see this, for example, as a play, but sees it as a mass, as a rite. Okay, this choric element of seeing the gods in the actors is what I think distinguishes Tom Wolfe's electric Kool-Aid acid test from Theodore Roszak and Charles Wright. I suppose why most people enjoy reading Wolfe more than the other two people, because Wolfe's book is more exciting. He's more into the things he's writing about from the sort of choric thing. So as I'm about to talk about the counterculture tonight, I'm faced with two choices. Either I'm going to become like Bob Cummings, a sort of respectable scholar who looks at them doing the frug saying, looks like New Guinea puberty rites. Or I have to act like Tom Wolfe and do the choric voice. We're hung up between pederastry or the choric voice of Thomas Wolfe. All that by way of preamble. Okay, how many of you have perused the Whole Earth Catalog, so I can have a sense of like how many of you are familiar with it? Okay. Oh gosh, that's a whole bunch, isn't it? Well, I'm glad you're here tonight. Okay. Popular culture critics. I can see a lot of you out there tonight are popular culture critics. Popular culture critics are like faced with two choices, right? When they deal with the material. Let's call one the inward way, right? One's the inward way. We start with culture and we hone into the object of culture, right? The object, the thing that's disappointing about that, is this microphone going on and off, or is that me? Oh, I see. I'm not speaking into it precisely. Okay. Popular culture critics are faced with two ideas. One would be the inward way, that is focusing in from culture to the phenomenon, right? But the thing that's wrong with this is it becomes behaviorism, right? The Elizabethan ages wrote Shakespeare. The other way popular culture critics can deal with an object is to deal the outward way, to take the object and see how it reflects the culture or in some way affects the culture. Well, if you believe in a symbiotic relationship between culture and an object and a phenomenon, then you've got to like do it a different way, right? You've got to do both. Okay, so what I'm going to do tonight as I approach the Whole Earth Catalog is first of all use that method which explains how the Whole Earth Catalog grew out of the counterculture. Secondly, then, I will show how I think the counterculture reflects the culture, the counterculture itself, okay? Okay. The Whole Earth Catalog is in many ways a stage in the phylogeny of the counterculture, reflecting some of the perennial values and meanings in American and Western culture. To account for why the Whole Earth Catalog has enjoyed so much success from its bestseller ranking in popular reading to the National Book Award, our method will have to be dual, accounting for its place as an historical product of the counterculture to its effects on and reflections of culture in general. Okay, here it comes. Somewhere around in the very late 60s and early 70s, the counterculture began to metamorphose. For the initiated, it was a gnosis to be intuited, but a gaffe to speak of. And for the uninitiated, the change was only difficultly perceived. Why is there so little political protest? On the one hand, it might be described as a rhythm observable in all variations of youth culture, rise and denouement. Right, the Presley Dean era was like great, but how did it end? Huh? Motorcycle hoods. The surfer days were great, but how did they end? We've got the custom car greaser dragging his little deuce coupe on the dragster. The counterculture itself was shuddering to its inevitable end, and its close seemed like the conclusion of a grisly Dionysiac feast. Murder at Altamont followed the near mythic peace of Woodstock. The high-spirited days of Kesey and the Pranksters was replaced by Manson and the Dune Buggy Squadron. The bliss of Consciousness 3 suddenly seemed out of place, except in those regions where it was slowly arriving by a process William Ogburn called cultural lag, or in the unsophisticated naivete of the bubblegum-chewing younger brothers and sisters. It was like an LSD trip gone bad. The New Left, while never a part of the counterculture, but frequently associated with it in the eyes of popular culture, was undergoing a change as well from the days of yippies and Weatherman bombing. Herbert Marcuse observed in early 1970, we have moved into a different historical sequence. Keith Maylard in Fusion put it more bluntly. While commenting on the Timothy Leary and Eldridge Cleaver controversy in the spring of 1970, Maylard observed that Leary and Cleaver may now find their constituency ignoring them, and is now, quote, into such things as rural communes, organic food, and ecology. If those people read anything, it is more likely to be Gary Snyder, Ray Mungo, and the Whole Earth Catalog than any diatribes from politicized holy men. Tom Hayden, who was going to marry Jane Fonda, Tom Hayden, who began to sense this new direction and apparently felt a loss of attention to what he and the others of the Chicago Seven were doing, warned in Ramparts, there is no escape. either into rural communes or existential mysticism from the dynamic of world confrontation. Okay, Hayden was warning about two things that were happening as people began to become disenchanted with politics around the early 1970 year. Hayden said, beware of existentialism, beware of rural communal living, right? On the one hand, we already had the existentialists, the Mersaults, people like John Lennon who were preaching the necessity to feel your pain along the lines of Arthur Janov's Primal Therapy. People were already getting into the existential life, and this was evidenced by mass exits from Harvard's graduate school into the blue-collar trades. People were already getting into a variant of existentialism in the sense of Camus' Father Paneloux when they became Jesus freaks. On the other hand, the rural communal living had always had a good part of the counterculture's attention as early as 1969. In the spring of 1969, from the large metropolitan centers with which the counterculture was associated, particularly San Francisco, people began making a slow sort of Völkerwanderung to places like New Mexico to set up communes, right? Places where experimental lifestyles could be carried out. By spring of 1971, major publications like Look and Esquire had already written articles about these communes, from Morning Star and Wheeler ranches in California to B.F. Skinner's intentional community at Twin Oaks in North Carolina. Now, the isolated character of the rural communal living made and makes any chance of consistency in lifestyle a matter of chance. More often as not, the people who lived in these communes found out what other people in other communes were doing by reading the numerous publications that appeared, that were devoted to this style of life. And one index of the popularity of this rural communal living was the appearance of such publications as the Organic Morning Glory Message out of San Francisco, Mother Earth News, Natural Lifestyles, which is coming out of New York, Puget Sound Access, the Canadian Whole Earth Almanac, and portions of Big Rock Candy Mountain. Other underground newspapers, you can remember those in the late 60s, they dealt almost solely with music or politics. Now we're like running special sections dealing with or supporting or aiding and abetting communal living, things like Seattle Sound News, Britain's Friends. Alicia Bay Laurel wrote a book called Living on the Earth, had much of the how-to information of communal living. Of course, the granddaddy of all these publications was the Whole Earth Catalog. Now, the catalog rode and created the ways for the new metamorphosis of the counterculture. Its success can be attributed to what it was creating. This summer, right, last summer, 2 summers ago, you're driving along the road and you see these guys out hitchhiking, right? And they got all their belongings in their knapsack, and where are they going? Well, they're on their way to British Columbia. They're on their way to Vermont. You know, all these places where it's rumored that homesteading is taking place. 2 years ago, the Canadian government, under its Youth Opportunities Act, supported 28 communes with a grant of $32,486. Those people who weren't involved in the communal movement would spend the summer camping, and then they would return to universities like Santa Cruz, where there were courses in intensive gardening, or places like the University of Connecticut, where our School of Agriculture has had more people enroll in the last 2 years than have enrolled in the last 100 years. Winston cigarette ads now pointedly put a couple in this rural environment saying, it's got a great down-home taste. Dylan is now talking about a quiet life in the woods, and in his song, Sign on the Window says, build me a cabin in Utah, marry me a wife, catch a rainbow trout. That must be what it's all about. Okay, these then are the incidents that give a historical summary to the counterculture's metamorphosis, how they changed from those street-talking, politically minded people of the late 60s. They may, in their brevity, give some indication of the cultural presence that account for the rise in popularity of the Whole Earth Catalog. The only unfortunate thing about this kind of giving this historical perspective is that it gives the illusion that the catalog was in one sense perhaps an unconscious victim of a historical process, or that the people associated with the catalog were ad men who psyched out the market and jumped on it. Neither one of these ideas is close to the truth. Those associated with the catalog had an historic sense of the demise of the counterculture and served as one of the midwives in its metamorphosis. Nowhere is this consciousness of the history of the counterculture clearer than in the catalog's folktale, Gurney Norman's Divine Rights Trip. The folktale originally appeared on the left pages of the last Whole Earth catalog and was subsequently republished in paper by Bantam Books. How many of you have read Gurney Norman's Divine Rights Trip? Well, that's a good portion. There'll be an exam for the rest of you at the end of the period, right? Okay, Bantam Books, right? You can get it for $1.25, I believe it is. Bantam Books makes a point on its cover of letting the reader know that Gurney Norman's novel originally appeared in the last Whole Earth catalog. They're not going to let that slide by, right? It's right there. They've got catalog printing. They've got a Whole Earth photo on there. And on the back is a review made by Ed McClanahan in the Rolling Stone, right? All those hippie things, they're all right there. And the review from that Ed McClanahan makes in Rolling Stone is this. Gurney Norman wasn't merely being droll when he subtitled Divine Rights Trip, Our Story Thus Far. Divine Right Davenport is our hero, our Odysseus, our Jason, our Beowulf, our Boone. And his quest for identity, his wholeness, is our quest. His struggle, our struggle, his triumph, ours too. And the novel is just that. Divine Right's ontogeny, in the classic sense of the folktale Norman insists that it is, recapitulates the phylogeny of the counterculture, right? What happens is if you read a lot of James Joyce, you begin to talk like this, you know. Ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Some of you are in biology, you know what I'm talking about. The human fetus, as it grows through its own ontogeny, recapitulates the phylogeny of the human species. It becomes a one-cell being. It becomes a frog, a marsupial, a man, a motorcycle, an ape. I don't know. All these things, you know. And what I'm suggesting Gurney Norman's Divine Rights Trip does is that in telling the story of divine rights development, Gurney Norman has recapitulated the development of the counterculture, the evolution of the counterculture. Now, the hero of this folktale is D.R. Davenport. In one way, D.R. stands for Divine Right, and an echo of Stuart Brand's purpose in the Whole Earth catalog. We are as gods and might as well get good at it. But in another way, in the disintegrating manner of the schizo, D.R. stands for David Ray, the murky half of our hero's bifurcated mind. D.R. is a 21-year-old dope dealer from the West Coast whose mind is fragmenting Humpty Dumpty fashion when he first appears in the novel behind the wheel of his gaily painted VW bus. Where have we seen painted buses before? Can I see any hands there? Right, Ken Kesey and the Pranksters, okay? And he's in this bus with his girlfriend Estelle. His bus, incidentally, his name is Urge. Now the quote that opens this book is from the Bible, and it reads this way: "A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways." And D.R. is unstable, right? On the one hand, he's Divine Right. On the other hand, he's David Ray. Okay? While all the other parties in the novel are heading west like lemmings to the California earthquake, while the whole movement of the counterculture was on a western glissando from Woodstock to Altamont, D.R. rides east in an upside-down version of the Turner thesis on the shock waves of a disintegrating mind and a disintegrating counterculture. It's the eastward and destructive pattern that we find in Easy Rider and Alice's Restaurant, right? As soon as you go east, your mind will crumble on you, right? Just like me, I went out there and got interested in popular culture. Just like D.R. is heading east. One of the first characters he meets, and D.R. seems to attract him like a drowning man at a lifeguard convention. Someone told me not to put that in. You know, they say that's Rotarian humor. Like a drowning man at a lifeguard convention is the lone outdoorsman. This rugged offspring of Indian fighting stock is in his own way an epic hero as funny as Natty Bumppo. He has a trail bike to ferry him from his campsite to the restroom, right? A Honda 90 probably. An AR-15 and a .357 Magnum pistol to complement his ever-vigilant preparedness for trouble. And a complete GMC camper to provide the 20th century version of self-reliance. When he spies Estelle and D.R. making love on top of a rock, He suppresses his desire to riddle their bodies with bullets for the more humane idea of inviting them to dinner and winning their hearts and minds. Where have you heard that before? Uh-oh. After all, hasn't he fought the war to win the peace? After an hilarious dinner with D.R. and Estelle, at which the lone outdoorsman has worn his cowboy clothing and watched the television program Westward, Westward, Norman reveals, in his tricky way, the outdoorsman's name. You ready for this? William F. Dixon. Richard M. Duckley. Want to run that one by again? The lone outdoorsman's name is William F. Dixon. Okay? Further east, D.R. and Estelle pick up the hitchhiking Greek, whose lore of theosophy and incurable penchant for nonstop monologues makes him sound like Neil Cassidy with a case of Buddhistic rabies. What the Greek pours into D.R.'s now acid-shattered cranium is the mucus conspiracy, which is being perpetrated by the Food and Drug Administration. The Greek is on his way to the library at the University of Oklahoma in Norman to destroy his autobiography, the last vestige of his ego, which has been secreted, Brodigan fashion. I'm thinking of the abortion. How many of you read Brodigan's Abortion? Hey, you guys better get to reading, you know that? There's going to be a great GRE test when you die, and God's going to ask you for your book list. And you guys are going to have nothing to give him. Okay. He's on his way to the library at the University of Oklahoma in Norman to destroy his autobiography, the last vestige of his ego, which has been secreted Brodigan fashion amongst all the MA theses. The Greek, like D.R., suffers from a fragmenting mind and desires the final immolation of his problem in nirvana. He shouts to D.R. and Estelle as he leaves, "I wanted the California earthquake because once I went down with it, I wouldn't have to think about how scattered were the fragments of my life and mind." All along, D.R. has had it in his mind to visit his friend Eddie in St. Louis. He arrives instead for a wake held for his friend who has been shot in the dope wars. The wake is a Walpurgis knock for D.R.'s debilitated mind, and he is reduced to a stuttering, incapacitated ninny. While televisions cackle Billy Graham and the dating game, Eddie's dope-dealing friends offer a Whitman sampler of psychedelics, and D.R. casts all the bummers of the I Ching: stagnation, adversity, weariness, the estranged, decay, the abysmal, and the abyss. Back in the bus, if things couldn't get worse, Estelle and D.R. have a fight which erodes D.R.'s futile attempts towards mental balance. When they arrive in Cincinnati, D.R. deposits Estelle at the bus terminal and goes out to visit his sister Marcella and family. D.R. finds Marcella's husband, Doyle, a changed man. He has got religion. Doyle relates that he too once felt he was going crazy, but, like a latter-day Jesus freak, or Kesey's Joe Bennon, sometimes a great notion, he has found solace in down-home fundamentalism. That D.R. should run into so many people in his same fragmented condition, each with their own solution, appears coincidental, but it is not. The one idea that structures the novel is synchronicity, that principle of meaningful coexistence of particulars that underlies the I Ching and that Tom Wolfe found in the electric Kool-Aid acid test structures so much of the prankster tradition out of which Norman writes. Gurney Norman was part of the original prankster family. Every occasion, Wolfe explained, provided an opportunity for an allegory, or, as Wilde put it, nature at its best imitates art. This is, finally, the method of the Whole Earth Catalog, to let every description of a tool serve also as a parable. When, for example, D.R. watches a Saturday morning cartoon show with his nephew, he is exposed to an allegory that he will soon unravel. Johnny Hero, with the help of Spider-Woman, enters the cave of a dragon. But from this point on, Spider-Woman explains, he must proceed by himself. Sure enough, when D.R. returns to the terminal, Estelle has left him, and D.R., like St. George, must fight the dragon himself. The dragon that Divine Right must fight is David Ray. And the dragon appears not only as a logo that heads each section, but as a symbol throughout the work. It is not a coincidence, then, that God speaks through Mrs. Godsey in a telephone message telling D.R. that his Uncle Emmett is dying at the home place. He leaves immediately for Kentucky, the mythic land of Daniel Boone that has been scarred by the strip mining that the poet Wendell Berry has so ethically deplored. It is in Kentucky that D.R. comes to grips with a dragon in his cave, and, in terms of the tradition that Joseph Campbell has outlined in The Hero of a Thousand Faces, D.R. is assisted by a helper. When his bus breaks down, D.R. is pointedly aided by a miner who mistakenly but portentously calls D.R. by his mother's maiden name, Collier. At this point, the hero's mind is at the apex of disorder, and he is pursued into a mine shaft by his hallucinated double. In this cave, hallucinating about dragons, protecting jewels, divine right triumphs in his struggle over David Ray and emerges a new man. There's a much calmer hero that enters Mrs. Godsey's store as she sorts mail for, listen to who she's sorting mail for. Gurney Norman just sneaks these little things in. Wendell Hall, Barry Berry, Mr. McClanahan, and Stuart Kesey, huh? Let's go by those again. Wendell Hall and Barry Berry, huh? Wendell Hall is the Kentucky poet who's deplored strip mining. Barry Hall is a friend of Gurney Norman's, was part of the prankster tradition. Mr. McClanahan, right? Ed McClanahan's the one who wrote the Rolling Stone Review on the end. And Stuart Kesey, right? Ken Kesey and Stuart Brand. Mrs. Godsey preaches trust in God as she sips her R.C., cola, not the church, and helps D.R. on his way to tend for the dying Emmett. It is the exigencies of Emmett's passing to the land of the honey pond and the fritter tree which puts D.R. to work and begins to clear the stupor of his once crazed mind. Hard work for his friend Leonard, his own tending of Emmett's rabbits that provide the manure to reclaim the strip-mined land, and long periods of stillness put D.R. on the road to wholeness. A phone call via Gurney Norman, who enters the novel as a character now, puts D.R. in touch with Estelle, who finally joins him in Kentucky. In the epilogue, D.R. and Estelle marry. But since this is a piece as much about the counterculture as D.R., much more is figured. The wedding party consists of Kentucky residents, as well as people recognizable as pranksters and the staff of the Whole Earth Catalog. When one of the young girls speaks of her desire for natural births, a Mount woman says, "Why, she has always depended on a nanny. Ginseng, the organic medicinal tea of the hip, known for years in the hills as saying. Communal, non-nuclear living, just all the kin living on the farm. The marriage comes to mean the wedding of hillbillies and hippies, folks and freaks, after the fashion of the Whole Earth Catalog and the Back to the Land movement. The ceremony itself is holistic, with readings from the Bible, a double-minded man, and the Book of Tao. The surest test if a man be sane is if he accepts life whole, as it is. The wedding in the book concludes appropriately with D.R. dressed as Daniel Boone, listening to the last hexagram of the I Ching. The transition from the old to the new time is already accomplished. In principle, everything stands schematized and is only in regard to details that success is still to be achieved. D.R. is a folk hero, and Gurney Norman's novel is a folk tale, since it mythologically sums up the history of the counterculture in the 70s. Set upon by Dixon, enticed by the obliteration of the Greeks' nirvana, bottoming out when head turns hood, mixing up drugs with crime, finding Doyle's Jesus may be the answer for some but not all, and finally coming to the consideration that it is only through hard work that the land of America is going to be reclaimed from the disasters of physical and spiritual strip mining. As the death of Emmett shook D.R.'s stupor and put him to work in this world, it was the death of Stuart Brand's father which put him to work building the Whole Earth Catalog. Brand, in the mid-'60s, if you read your electric Kool-Aid acid test closely, was a member of the whole prankster affair and was the prankster who had these buttons made up and posters made up saying one thing. Why haven't we seen a picture of the whole Earth? Wolf's point in the electric Kool-Aid acid test was that everything the prankster said was metaphoric. So Brand's question is as loaded as a Zen puzzle. Why haven't we seen a picture of the whole Earth? Does he mean the Earth isn't whole yet, that we still war with each other, or that we have to link the world, as Buckminster Fuller suggests, to make it whole? Or does the question work like a Zen riddle to throw one back onto one's perspective? Why you have to get off the world to take a picture of the photo, to take a picture of it? Or is it possible to make a picture of the world as a whole, since it is a 3D solid? In any event, by December of 1968, 8 months after his father's death, Stuart Brand had arranged for NASA to shoot a photo of the Earth, and the first photo appeared on the first catalog, which the first catalog appeared there were only issued 2,000. Several months after this, the truck store opened in Menlo Park, California, to accommodate all the requests that were coming through the catalog. In all, there were 5 catalogs before the last Whole Earth catalog appeared in spring 1971 with a press run of 200,000, a first press run of 200,000, and mass distribution by Random House. That's 100 times the first press run of the Whole Earth catalog. And as you know, it went through many printings after that. In fact, they've just gone through, I think, their 3rd printing, and they have more than 1.5 million copies of the Whole Earth catalog in circulation right now. The supplements, a sort of magazine that carried essays and came out twice between every biannual edition of the catalog, numbered 9 until the last supplement appeared, edited by Ken Kesey and Paul Krasner. Okay, how many of you read that one, the last supplement of the Whole Earth catalog? 1, 2. Hey, listen, you guys have a bookstore out here, right? No? Okay, I'll mail 500 copies out here, right? Please don't miss that one either. That'll be on the exam. With the publication of the last catalog, Brand and the staff deliberately ceased publication with the idea that if a need for catalog information still existed, the vacuum created by their cessation would give impetus to other similar publications. There were a great number of publications that have come out since the Whole Earth catalog folded. Magazines like Place, First New Earth catalog. Some friends of mine and I put out Mining the Store in Connecticut. Different things like this have appeared. On June 12, 1971, the catalog staff hosted the demise party in San Francisco and invited suggestions, again in the form of a parable, about what should be done with the thousands of dollars that the catalog had made in profit as a nonprofit organization. Okay, how does one describe the catalog? Huh? It's this huge polysemous thing. Huh? That's a little respectable language here. You know, many-meaning thing. Huh? It differs from Sears and Roebuck's in one significant way. A Sears and Roebuck's catalog sells you, right? The Whole Earth catalog, like the I Ching, only points to things. Huh? It offers it as a possibility. The catalog does not sell any line of thoughts or any objects. It simply offers them open-handedly. It is futuristic in the sense that the tools offered may well build a future society or societies. And at the same time, it's backward-looking in that many of the tools and advice that the catalog offers are sage bits of wisdom from grandmother's age. The 9 large categories the tools the catalog offers fall into are whole systems, land use, shelter, industry, craft, community, nomadics, communications, and learning. The catalog offers a panoply of tools and styles in a wide spectrum of areas. It is whole, and it only offers them as a catalog of possibilities. But there is something as well which makes the catalog different from other catalogs, and that is a consciousness that might be traced back as far as the days of the pranksters. Wolf describes the pranksters' consciousness in this way. Everything in everybody's life is significant, and everybody is alert, watching for the meanings. Everyone is picking up on the most minute incidences as if they are metaphors for life itself. After a while, it starts to infect you. There is that consciousness about the catalog. First of all, there is a reverence for the words of others, treating them as significant as, let's say, the Bible. Here are some from the January 1971 supplement cover. There is only one sin, fretting, Neil Cassidy. Far out is fine, who's minding the store? Gordon Ashby. Nobody guaranteed you it was going to be easy, Ken Kesey. And this consciousness appears in simple descriptions as they suddenly escalate into moral allegory. Here is Gurney Norman talking about raising rabbits. It begins simply enough as advice on the desirability of this animal as compared to the chicken, but then spins off. We talked about bunnies against rabbits as food. That got us to talking about the difference between vocation and avocation, of the unhappiness that comes when a person's play is too far removed from his work. Raising rabbits is play, fun, a hobby, but it also be work, good, productive work. And so he got into the organic life as an ideal, and so forth. There is a moral sensibility that appears in much of the catalog, so that a simple description of building a stone house, even a round rock has a flat side if you can find it, stands out as a parable. Even a round rock has a flat side if you can find it. This consciousness stands out even more in the supplements, particularly in the last supplement to the Whole Earth Catalog. When Kesey suggests giving the Ching a ring, or mixes Eastern theosophy with comic book characters, the result is that of a sage who makes fun of himself as he goes along. But it also reveals a consciousness which mixes the here and now with the transcendental, rabbits with ethics, popular culture with the timeless. As Brand observes about the catalog, the solutions are always meta. The means are always funky field expedient. The solutions are meta, the means are funky field expedient. It is this linking of the meta with the funky field expedient that the catalog allows for, provides for. In this way, it is the ideal compendium of access information for a counterculture in a time of consolidation. The counterculture had for a time withdrawn into the somnambulistic world of the acid dream. It had dropped out into bliss consciousness and lost touch with the field of the here and now. I think of like the Maharishi, Leary, this whole sort of like mentality. But as Toynbee has written, a transfiguration in solitude can have no purpose and perhaps even no meaning except as a prelude to the return of the transfigured personality into the social milieu out of which he had originally come. The return is the essence of the whole movement as well as its final cause. It is a return from the world of Timothy Leary's and the Maharishi's world of transcendental meditation that Huxley advocates in The Doors of Perception. Over against the Arhat, retreating from appearances into the entirely transcendental nirvana, stands the Bodhisattva, for whom suchness and the world of contingencies are one, and for whose boundless compassion every one of those contingencies is an occasion, not only for transfiguring insight, but also for the most practical charity, right? The Bodhisattva is the Buddhist who goes up there, all the way, sees the light and says, I got work to take care of back here first. And he turns around and comes back, right? After the lyrical excesses of the other world comes the need for dramatic action in this one. Karma Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita follows the flights of the mind in the Rig Veda. The dynamism of the will must put those head dreams to work in the here and now. And that is the tone of the Whole Earth that the Whole Earth Catalog develops. To link the meta with the funky field expedient requires, first of all, a demythologizing of all those metas that have drifted free from those anchors in the here and now, right? Metas that have drifted free from their anchors in the here and now are also politely referred to as bullshit, right? Throughout the catalog, there are forces at work to explode the hallucinatory world of thoughts when they are not wholly connected to reality. Wendell Berry, for example, finds a justification of strip mining and other ecological disasters by consumer demand a chronic public insanity. He advocates thinking little, connecting the thoughts about ecology to everyday life, not cleaning the Passaic River. What kind of soap are you using? Okay. Money, Dickens had observed in Our Mutual Friend, has value because of a mass hallucinatory compact. All those shiny dollar bills you got in your pocket right now with George Washington, right? That's paper, right? We all know that. But there's a poetry that exists, this mass hallucinatory compact that this represents value, right? Okay. And in the catalog, one finds Stuart Brand concerned with finding new ways for people to garner and distribute labor and products that is free from this metaphoric complicity. Politics as well, particularly that of the New Left, has a way of dwelling in the pure world of meta, an ideology divorced from the field of individual responsibility. In the last supplement to the Whole Earth Catalog, Kesey is interviewed by Argus, the the publication of the White Panther Party, and reveals a Thoreau-like sense of responsibility. Argus. What are you doing that's positive for the revolution, Kesey? Kesey. We took this little guy, Tony, who's a little spade without a mother. We took him downtown and bought him a pizza. Argus. So what you're saying is you don't relate to political prisoners? Kesey. I relate to people, not issues. Words themselves, Wordsworth could tell us, have a way of becoming pure meta, living a deracinated existence free from roots in a reality that should be their cause. That is why Gurney Norman explains he likes to have conversations with farmers. Words begin from concrete subjects. They are not abstractions built on abstractions, drawing room conversations dependent on other drawing rooms. The whole trend towards natural foods and natural living is itself an attempt to reconnect the meta and the funky field expedient. If the counterculture had withdrawn into an hallucinatory world where ecological slogans, leftist rhetoric, and words themselves suddenly took on a life of their own, and the catalog means to wake up the dreamer and put him to work carrying out his dreams. One reader will suggest we must stop being such heads and learn the act of follow-through, and concludes that may mean that dropouts may better start. Let's phrase that one again. And that may mean that dropouts should be dropping back in. That was nice. While the counterculture has defined itself in an adversary role, counterculture, Wendell Berry suggests it would be better to shift from the role of critic to that of producer, to produce some viable examples of what you're asking for. The impatience the catalog feels with those who aren't ready to realize the meta in the here and now, but would rather talk about it, is revealed in staffer Diana Shugart's reply to a reader's suggestion. A lot of times when people say, why don't you do such and such? We say, hey, that's a groovy idea. Why don't you do it? I don't know. It's always seemed to me that one of the main things the catalog says is, do it yourself. What I don't dig is the underlying feeling I sometimes get that we're being asked to do the stuff that belongs by its very nature to the head that thought it up, to do it. If the catalog has one message, it is, do it now, here's where you can get the tools. Well, the catalogs, hey, wait a minute, huh? Knock this. How much time do you guys have? I've got, while the catalog's aim might be seen as providing the counterculture, won't be long now, while the catalog's aim might be seen as providing the counterculture with tools to realize its dreams, it can be and has been used in a variety of other ways. Now, I got this little, you get those catalogs that come out to the mail, and they say you can order all these things through them, you page through them, it says a wristwatch radio, or a vegetable slicers, Mises, slices, dinces, and quinces, or automatic coffee starters, you can start your coffee while you're in bed at 4 in the morning, Well, I was reading one of these things, and it advertised the Whole Earth Catalog, and this is how the advertisement read. Whether you buy anything through the Whole Earth Catalog or not, it's great fun and quite an education to browse through. This points to another use for the catalog. It creates a wonderful oeuvre to dwell in, the answer to Laura Nero's request in song, wish I could find a good book to live in. For those who aren't going to go out and do it, there is always the armchair where one can dream that every catalog holder has built a geodesic dome. For the counterculture camp follower, the book can serve also as a means for discriminating what is kosher. For those who, like the Greek of the Divine Rights trip, love the ethical domain, there are prescriptions and aphorisms that rival Oriental philosophy and can be placed next to those of Montaigne, Pascal, and Emerson, and top those of Franklin's Almanac. Or for those who prefer to read about the ethical life, there are reports from the field that stand alongside those of Augustine, Thoreau, Simone Weil, and Thomas Merton. But beyond the hobbyist and the armchair fantasist, there are camp-following sons and daughters and those concerned with the ethical life. The Whole Earth Catalog appeals to another particularly American type, the rugged individualist. Perhaps it is the lone outdoorsman, the guy who rides his motorcycle to the men's room and has his GMC camper. Perhaps it is the lone outdoorsman of Gurney Norman's folktale that may enjoy the catalog the most. The reader that is titillated by the survival stories of Field and Stream, has his pickup truck and home ready for any national disaster, will find the catalog provides him with a host of survival gear that will make him self-sufficient. Shades of Emerson. But the rugged individualist in America feels a bit embarrassed about his activities, I mean, how do you explain to your friends, listen, I just went out and bought I'm working off my crick, this generator to get me electricity. It cost me $4,000. And the guy's, $4,000? You could have hooked up to the power line for free, and $16 a month. Oh, well, How do you explain that kind of? How do you explain to your friends, I just went out and bought $200 worth of dehydrated food? The rugged individualist does not have to really worry about explanations. Most of his friends don't ask for explanations, I suppose. One reader of the catalog suggests starting a fire with steel wool and the flint in a cigarette lighter, and then adds, of course, you can fill the lighter with fluid if you want, but that takes all the fun out of it. Well, fun may be an acceptable reason for children that act like Tom Sawyer, making Jim's escape at the end of the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn more difficult and more romantical. But what is a suitable reason for the adult who has bought the watermill generator and the ton of dehydrated food? Well, there is a grab bag of American apocalypses. For the religious, the second coming. For others, a landing from outer space, the nuclear holocaust, etc. If you were near your radio on March 18th, 1972, you could have heard Joe Campbell on American Reports urge your acquisition of the catalog and the building of a self-sufficient complex, Buckminster Fuller's Geodesic Dome, Rodale's Organic Gardening. What Campbell was warning us against, and say why we should get the catalog, was that there's going to be an imminent power shortage, and this is going to be tied to an ecological apocalypse in which oxygen will be short. Now, if you have your geodesic dome with all these green plants in there, you'll be safe. You can read your Whole Earth catalog and just grin. All those people out there dying around you. At the root of all this American ideal of rugged individualism, which is, after all, a variant of existentialism. Wait a minute, I blew that one. At the root of all this is the American ideal of rugged individualism, which is, after all, a variant of existentialism. The survival story where it appears in high culture, from Beckett or Camus' The Plague to Robinson Crusoe, or in popular culture from Snowbound and On the Beach to the genre stories of Field and Stream, provides a situation in extremis where a man is forced, presumably, to act in a more, quote, natural and existential way. The apocalypse, or the dire report, works in the same manner and provides an excuse for what would otherwise be labeled romantic, a self-sufficiency which may have been necessary some time ago, but is needless and more expensive today. While the catalog may feed the rugged individualist desires of some, it does not preach of an imminent Holocaust and the necessity of survival skills, nor does it seem to encourage self-sufficiency as if the counterculture were some adversary to technocracy, as Rozak and Reich and others have led us to believe. In the purpose which appears on the first page of every catalog, the implication is made that a new individualism is appearing, which follows from technocracy and depends on technology for the tools which frees one from a sole-minded concern with survival. The purpose reads, we are as gods, and might as well get good at it. So far remotely done, power and glory, as via government, big business, formal education, church, has succeeded to a point where gross defects obscure actual gains. In response to this dilemma, and to these gains, a realm of intimate, personal power is developing. Power of the individual to conduct his own education, find his own inspiration, shape his own environment, and share his adventure with whoever is interested. Tools that aid this process are sought and promoted by the Whole Earth Catalog. Implied here is a view of cultural evolution with which culture critics should be concerned. It is a view not unlike that of Margaret Mead in Culture and Commitment. Mead divides human history into three evolving sequences. In primitive, post-figurative cultures, lifestyles are determined by tradition and primogeniture. Going out there in the old Samoan Islands, you ask a guy, you say, why are you a canoe builder? And he says, well, my father was a canoe builder, and grandfather was a canoe builder. Okay, these are post-figurative cultures. Now, the second stage that Mead outlines is co-figurative cultures, right? Lifestyles are determined by the peer group. Gee, Mom, everyone's wearing Madras shirts. I'd like one. Or keeping up with the Joneses, or like hula hoops or frisbees. Co-figurative cultures. Lifestyles are determined by peers, right? But Mead sees us moving towards a third stage, in the face of accelerated cultural change, right? What Toffler calls future shock. It is for this state, Mead's prefigurative culture, where, to quote Stuart Brand, a realm of intimate personal power is developing. Okay? In this third stage, as Mead sees it, we're going to be developing individual lifestyles, serial lifestyles. We'll be continually changing. The idea is very close to Stuart Brand's idea that an individual can develop his own education, make his own dreams, run his own movies, and make his own fantasies. The Whole Earth Catalog provides a cornucopia of tools that will assist in the development of these individual and serial styles of life. Will the Whole Earth Catalog have an effect? Can a catalog affect cultural change? In Aldous Huxley's novel Island, it is the Sears and Roebuck catalog which is the serpent in the garden. Murrigan sees the Sears and Roebuck's catalog and his eyes sort of dance, and all of a sudden, the beautiful Palinese culture on which Huxley's Island is built is destroyed. Sears and Roebuck's has had an effect. Huxley, I would guess, got this idea from something I found in Huxley's letters. Huxley said, Roosevelt is said to have advocated free distribution of Sears and Roebuck's catalogs in communist countries to convert the inhabitants not to Christianity, but to consumerism. The Sears and Roebuck's catalog at the Brussels World's Fair, it is reported, attracted mobs of people at the American Pavilion who ignored the other exhibits. Okay? That's one, I think, suggestion that the Whole Earth Catalog might have an effect. But the Whole Earth Catalog is as much an encyclopedia as a catalog. Encyclopedia, from the Greek enkylos, or the whole of, paideia, learning. An idea as old as the polymathic activities of Pliny the Elder. Perhaps the question of the possibility of influence is summed up in the quote, "The philosophy of the Whole Earth Catalog was an attitude of tolerance and liberalism and of concern with the practical. It had a widespread and revolutionary effect as an expression of mind and of perspective." Actually, I've been indulging in a bit of subterfuge, right? That quote actually refers to Diderot's Encyclopédie. Right? It was Diderot's revolutionary idea, as it is Brand's, that the skills of technology and knowledge should be made available to everyone so that they can control their own destinies. We're still harvesting the fruit of that idea here and now. Questions? Yes, young man. I didn't mention Richard Grossinger. Why should I have? I don't know. Who is he? I don't know who he is. Who is Richard Grossinger? I don't know everything. What did he write? Solar Journals? No, I don't. Could you tell us about it? No, I don't mean to be putting you on, seriously. Okay, well, we'll come back to that then. Any other questions? Yeah. I'll tell you what. I'd love to send you all supplements. Why don't you just give me your address? And I've been trying to get the last supplement to the Whole Earth Catalog for the class I teach at Connecticut. The last supplement to the Whole Earth Catalog was put out by The Realist, run by Paul Krasner, and by the people with the Whole Earth Catalog. Now, I don't know if any of you know about Krasner and The Realist, but Krasner is the most irresponsible person you've ever met. I mean, he never gets things out. So we wrote Krasner, and, no answer. We send threatening letters, bombs to the mail, no reply. So now we're trying to get it through the Whole Earth truck store, which is still in operation in Menlo Park in California. Now you can get the address out of the Whole Earth catalog for the truck store and ask them to send you, if they have any more, the last supplements to the Whole Earth catalog. It's been very hard for me to get mine. Every time I have one, a popular culture historian comes up and says, "Listen, I'd like to buy it and put it in my archive." You know, so I'm never able to hold on to them either. Next question. Oh, come on. Well, what else would you like me to say? Yes? Otis Twist to Disneyland. Oedipus in Disneyland. Never heard of it. I haven't heard of a lot of things. You know, I'm really out of it. I live out in Connecticut, and where I live in Connecticut, it's even more remote than Ames, Iowa, you know. So, any other questions? Okay, well, thanks for dropping by. See ya.